So carrying on from the last video, we started getting into the SolidDNA framework. You'll find the Git hub repo. You've got these files. You go into tutorials. The last one we did was the SolidDNA WPF add-in. I simply copy and pasted that, renamed it to custom properties, and then renamed the folder inside custom properties, and then renamed from inside Visual Studio. I then renamed the solution by pressing F2 and giving it a new name. And the same for the SolidDNA.WPF add-in. I just pressed F2 and renamed. That went ahead and renamed these files. Then I right-clicked on the project and clicked Properties. And to Application, and I changed the assembly name and the default namespace. And in the assembly info, I changed the title and product. So this is a quick way of cloning the previous tutorial and simply getting the exact same tutorial just with a new name. So you can leave it as the old name if you don't want to do that, but that's what I've done to get to this step. Then I simply renamed the old XAML file. So if we go to WPF, it was called My Add-in Control. I've gone ahead and just renamed that inside Visual Studio again, just pressing F2 and giving this the new name Custom Properties UI. Then I go into the code behind class here, and then you'll see this class. This will be called WPF add-in. Press Control RR, so hold Control and press the letter R twice, and it highlights green. And then you can go ahead and type a new name. So this was like my WPF add-in or something. So you just rename that to whatever name you want. Again, you don't have to do that, but that's all I've done to get the project to where it is now from the last video. So if you want to follow along exactly, you can do those steps, or you can simply just get this project from GitHub and you can see the completed version. That gives us the XAML. Now I made a video before this one on WPF, making this exact WPF layout. So if you haven't seen it already, just go to my YouTube channel and you'll see the last video was a WPF, the basics. That will go through creating this exact screen you see here. So you'll get this exact border stack panel. All of what you see here has been explained in the last video. So just go ahead and watch that video if you want to understand creating this. So we're at this stage now where we've got a UI ready to work with. What we need this to do, we've got a little screenshot. So we've got an apply, reset and refresh button. The apply wants to go ahead and save all these properties to the part. The reset wants to clear all these properties and make them blank. And the refresh wants to read back in from the part. So it wants to read like the custom properties here, and the material and the mass. And then for each one I've just made a little description here of what we expect to happen. So the description field, we want it to be from a custom property called description. You want to be able to read the normal value, not the fully evaluated one, and you want to be able to write the property back. Status revision part number, you want to read the fully resolved, the evaluated custom property, and you don't want to be able to write back. The material wants to be a list of all materials, and you want to be able to select one and click apply to save the material to the part. These checkboxes are still just a custom property called manufacturing information, but this time if we selected multiple, it would then create a new custom property with each name like this: plasma, comma, fold, comma, weld. So just whatever's checked will become a string with commas separating the string. And then when you read it back in, you want to do the same thing. You want to read in this string, separate it by commas, and then check the boxes that need checking. And the rest is all the same custom properties, and then read the mass here. So that's the point of this whole form and what we want it to do. It's effectively reading and writing custom properties for the most part, with a little addition there of reading the mass and a drop down for reading and writing the material. So let's get started on this. So I can close this down now. Well, I'll leave it open for reference. So we've got the UI, as I mentioned we made in the previous video. We want to do a slight tweak on this. So the first thing I thought after I made that video is this will really only work on parts. So you're setting custom properties and reading mass which you can get from an assembly, but the point of this anyway, and the requirement from the customer, was that this is to run on parts only, not drawings or assemblies. So what we want to do is create a little screen here that overlays or just simply shows, and this main stack panel hides when something except a part is open. So this is really easy. So go into your border, so we're inside the little padded border, and we've got a stack panel right now. Let's just chuck that inside of a grid. And this is a good way because a grid will just have one column, one row by default. So now the stack panel is in column 0, row 0. We're just going to create another stack panel. We're going to give this one a name so that we can hide and show it. We'll call this main content. We'll call this one no part content. Very imaginative name. For the moment, let's just hide this main panel so we can see what it's going to look like. And then in the stack panel, we'll put a text block with the text, please open a part. I want that to be horizontally center. We want to be vertically centering the whole stack panel, so it's in the center. And then let's add an image to this. So you'll see here I've got a part PNG. All I did to get that was right click, add existing item, and then I created this PNG file. And then the important part is make sure the build action down here is set to resource. Once you've done that, it's a simple case of going inside the stack panel, typing image, and then the source is just going to be the name of the file, part.png. Because it's not inside of a subfolder, it's in the root, it's just part.png. You'll see this is a bit oversized, so let's do max width of 100, say. And there's a nice little screen that you'll see when you've got a, say, drawing or assembly open or nothing open at all. It's a hint to open a part. We'll just put a little margin around this image. There we go, and just spaces it off the text a little bit. So now we've got a stack panel, and we've also got another stack panel, and because this is a grid, if I get rid of that visibility, you can see one is on top of the other, because it's a grid fills the whole space, and by default there's only one column and one row, and both of these go on the same column and row, which is what we want. But obviously we want to hide the part, the please open part, when a part's open, and show the main screen, and we want to flip it round in any other instance. So we need to just hide this for while we're hide that there, so when we're working on it we can see this and we don't get annoyed by constantly seeing this. But by default, when we open the add-in, we don't want this screen to be shown by default. We want it to be shown here by default so we can see what we're doing, but when it's actually loaded and opened, we don't want it. So in the user control here, we just go down and type loaded, press enter and then tab. It'll create a new event in the code behind class, which you can press F7 when you're in here to get to the code behind, or you can just expand this XAML and double click this CS file. You can see the loaded that it's added here. I also made a note here of what we did, so we copied the previous tutorial files and renamed them. We also changed the references of the SolidWorks DLLs. I noticed I'd done that wrong in the last video. So if you just go over to here, references, select all the SolidWorks interop, and just make sure this embed interop types is set to false. I believe it was true in the last video by mistake. And then we created a screen for when the part isn't open, which is what we've just done, and we included an image as a resource. So we've just done those steps. We've now added a method that gets fired once this screen's fully loaded, and the first thing we want to do, as mentioned, is to show this no part content screen and hide this main content. So we want to show this and hide this. So when we're loaded, we just do this dot no part content dot visibility equals visible, and this dot main content dot visible is hidden. By default, show the no part open screen. And now we want to hook into the SolidDNA framework. The main thing we care about is when the active file has changed, because that's what we're keeping track of, whatever the current model open is. It's as simple as DNA.application.active model information changed. And that's an event that gets fired by SolidDNA whenever effectively the active model has changed, or anything about that information has changed. So that's what we want to hook into. And then once we've done that, the first thing we'll do is check if this is a part, and if it is, we'll do read the information, and if it isn't, then we'll show the other screen. So let's just create a function. We'll call it read details, so we can just read the information and do what we want with it. We'll comment the previous classes first. Fired when the control is fully loaded, and the active SolidWorks model is changed. Reads all the details from the active SolidWorks model. So we've got them there. The other thing we want to do before we get started too much is we want to make a note of all these specific names, these custom property part names. So let's just scroll up to the top, go into private members, and we're going to make a load of private constant strings, m custom property, and then it's going to have a specific name, but we'll leave that off a second. We'll make a blank like this, and we'll just copy and paste a load. And then we'll go back to the top, we'll make description, which is called description. Status, and you'll see that is just where I'm getting them from here, this list I've made, and this has come from the customer that's requiring this. So we've got revision. And there's all the properties we need. So now we can reference these when we come to need them. So we've got it loaded, we show the no part open, we hide the main content, we then listen out for the active model changing, and then whenever it changes we run this function called read details. And then in here, the first thing we need to do is we need to jump onto the UI thread, because we're going to be changing the UI. We're going to be loading things into these text boxes. So to do that, you can only change UI when you're on what's called the UI thread. And by default, this, because it's an event that's been fired from here, which got fired from the DNA application, this isn't necessarily going to be the UI thread. So to be sure, we call thread helpers dot run on UI thread, and then like a function, so open and close the brackets like that. But it's asking for an action, the thing we want to actually do, the code we want to run on the UI thread. So to start it, you just do another open and close of parentheses, equals greater than, press enter, squiggly, and then close squiggly. And that's what it looks like, and that's how you do this run on UI thread. And now everything inside here is going to be code, just as if you were here writing code, but now inside here you'll be guaranteed you're running on the UI thread, which is what we need. So this is going to get fired whenever the active model's changed. So the first thing we want to do is get the active model. We want to then query what that new model is. So create a new variable called model. DNA.application.active model will get you the active part, assembly, drawing, whatever it is, and it'll be of type model, which is a SolidDNA class. So get the active model, Now, as we mentioned previously, the customer only wants this to work on parts, so not drawings or assemblies. This could also be no model. This gets fired even when everything's closed, because effectively the active model has changed. It's changed to nothing. So we need to check, for one, if this has even got a model open, and then we also want to check if that's a part. If it's null or if it isn't a part, then we want to do this again. We want to show the no part screen. So we'll copy that, and then we'll do the check. We'll do if model if model is null, or if not, model is part. So effectively, if the model isn't a part. So this is checking if we have no model, or the model is not a part, show the no part screen and return. So as mentioned, we'll paste this, which is the show no part screen, and then we just return. We don't want to go any further. Otherwise, if we get past this if, it means that we've got a part. So if we've got a part, we then want to show the content. We want to do the opposite of this. So if we got here, we have a part, and then we want to show the main content. So simply flip these around. That becomes hidden, this becomes visible. And that's enough to actually test now. So let's go and press F5 and run this, and let's see if, at bare minimum, our form shows up. It shows the no part, and then when we create a part, it goes visible. So there's our screen. You can see the nice little please open a part icon. We go and open a part that I've started messing with, and you can see there's the screen. It's then hidden the other icon and shown the main screen. When we close the part, it should also go back, which it does. And then we could even create a new part, which will still show. And then let's create a drawing from that part. Well, let's just open an existing part. And you should see when we get a drawing, it shows please open a part. If we close the drawing, and then we've got a part open, and it shows here. So it seems like that's working fine now. We've got, this screen only appears when we've got a part open, which is what we want. So the next thing we want to do is read the information. So as well as when the part opens, when a new part appears we want to read, we've got this refresh button, and that also wants to do the same thing. So we'll link that button in at the same time, and then we'll start reading the information. So let's go and do that. So we already monitor for the active model changing here, which calls read details. Let's go ahead and just hook that refresh button in while we're here. So click the button, it highlights here. Type click, press enter, down and tab to create a new event handler. We'll just rename it from button click to read button click. Go to the code behind and rename it there as well. Called when the read button is clicked. Can't type today. Read, what did we call it? Read details. Go ahead and move these into the region button events to keep things clean. This is really startup. And this is model events. Just trying to keep everything nice and tidy. Minimize that. So we've got the model, we've checked it isn't null and it is a part, we've shown the right screen, and now we want to start reading some content. So most of it is, let's just close this down. most of it's custom properties, so let's do all the custom properties first. And for the most part, they're all just reading. So these are reading evaluated, the read-onlys, and everything else is just reading the regular. So again, with SolidDNA, it's really simple. Just type model.custom properties, and then you'll open and close your brackets again, just like before, equals greater than, squiggly, squiggly, and finish off. So again, the exact same appearance, but this time it's going to give us properties. So if we type properties in those parentheses, this is now a list of all properties of the part. So inside here, we can now access all the custom properties that's in the current model, and we can also set them. So the first one we want to do, this is query all custom properties, and now we want to get the description. We want to set the description text and the text of that. So if you go to the form, if you followed the last video, you'll see this text box here is called description text. So that's what we're doing, we're getting that description text, then we're saying the actual text of that box equals, and then we just want to query this properties because this is all of them in the part. So we do properties dot first or default, which will basically look for the first item that it finds that matches this query that we'll write inside here, and returns it. So f is just, you can call this anything, this is just a lambda expression, and I typically just start them with f, but you can call them whatever, you can call it property if you like, so it's more obvious. And you want to find the property with the name description. So there's the name, so we want to do string.equals, because we want to compare two strings. We want to compare this custom property description, the name that we said it's going to be. So we want to compare if the word description is equal to the property name. And then we also want to put a third check in, which is this invariant culture ignore case, which just means it'll ignore upper and lowercase characters. So it'll match if it says description with a capital D, it'll match if it's with a lower D, it'll match if the C's got an uppercase. So it just basically ignores the capitalization, the casing of the characters. So we're going to look at all the properties, going to find the first one, or nothing if there isn't one, that matches the name description. So here we're checking the property name. Once we get that, because it might be null, we'll do a question mark so that it won't continue this expression if it's not got a value. But if it has got a value, you do dot, and you want the value. So that is how you will read the property description and get its value. So if you want to see that again slightly more broken down, you could do this first, which would be var description property equals properties, the first or default of the property where the name equals description, and then you'd get a custom property, and that might be null, and then you could do the check if it's not null, or you could just type in here custom property, or in this case description property, and the question mark just means don't continue after the question mark if it's null. So if it's null, it will return right there, so it will set text to null. But if it isn't null, it moves over the question mark, and then you're just literally doing this, you're doing description dot, you're getting the value inside the description. So all putting a question mark there does is prevent you from having to do this and then saying if description property is null or isn't null, then do this. It's like a quick way of checking. So to get that into like a nice one-liner, you just place it all in one go. And that's read. That whole line there then reads the custom property, if there is one, that matches this name of description. So all you have to do now to read every other property is just copy and paste, change the text. So we'll change this to status. We'll set the status text in the UI. So again, this status text here, which has got the name status text. We'll set that text property to the property here, which has got the name of status, which is just a string. And we've done this here so that if we want to rename them, they're all in a nice easy location. We could just type the word directly in here like that, where we're checking if the property name equals status and the property name equals description. But this is a bit of a bad practice because these are variables that have been given by the customer and might change, as well as they're going to be used more than once. So when we come to set the values, we want to set the word description. So then in future, if you change this to be description 2, you'd have to change it here, and then you'd also have to go down and when we set the value, change it there. So whenever you've got a property, you want to keep it in a variable up here, so it's nice and organized. So that should read the description and the status. The status we mentioned here wants to be the evaluated, the fully resolved custom property. So just change this value at the end to resolved value, and that'll do that for you. Copy and paste again, do revision, and you can see how easy this is. It's nice and quick to go through all of them. So the revision text and the custom property with the revision word. Then want to do part number, same again. Resolve value. The material we'll come to in a minute. Custom properties manufacturing info we'll do last, just because that's a bit more complicated. So we'll put a note here of manufacturing info, but we'll come back to that. The mass and the length, we want to do both the value and the evaluated, so the normal and the evaluated. So paste in here length. So we've got 2 length boxes. The one's called text and the other's the evaluated one. So the normal one wants to be the normal value. And the evaluated, the read-only one, wants to be the fully resolved value. You got the mass. We'll do, or we might as well do now because it's really easy. But we'll finish off the custom properties because we're inside the custom properties function here. But outside here, we'll just make a quick note to set the mass. Then we want the finish, which is going to come from the drop down. So again, we'll jump back to this because we want to set a list based on the existing property if we have one. In fact, let's just do that now anyway. So we want to get the finish first. So we just save it in a variable this time. Get finish, and we'll get the value. And now what we need to do, because this will be a text value, we need to check this drop down, this combo box here. We need to find a combo box item with the same name and then select it. So we'll try and find matching item. So if this dot finish list dot items dot so we're going to do a for each statement here. I think it's going to be the simplest way. We'll get for each item. We want to check then the item we know is a combo box item, so we'll cast it to that. And if the item dot content, which is a string, equals the finish. So if the combo box item equals the finish, put some parentheses around these, then we want to do this dot finish list dot selected item equals item. And then we want to break from this for loop, because if we found one we don't want to continue. That's going to moan that it's not a string, isn't it? Yeah, just cast that to a string. So check if the combo box item has the same name. If so, select it. And then before we do that, in case we don't find one, clear the selection first. So this dot finish list dot selected index is -1. So I think that's probably the quickest way of setting the finish. So you get the property itself first, which is going to be the name. Then you clear the list, which is this list. In terms of the selection, we get rid of the selected item. And then we loop through every one. And then we convert it to a combo box item because it's a combo box item here. And then we get the content, which is the string inside, which is this. We cast it to a string because it could be anything. So we tell it it's a string and we compare. We say if it's equal to finish. And we're just doing a direct comparison for now. We don't care about the upper and lower case because they really should be exactly the same in this case. If we find one that's exactly the same, then we select it doing this. So that should find and load in the finish if it matches, and otherwise it'll look like this. It'll be blank. Exactly the same thing for purchase information. So we can copy and paste this for purchase information. So purchase info. Get the purchase information, change the purchase list. And if we were doing this more than a few times, we could just put this inside of a nice function and make it, you know, nicer than this, but for quickness we'll just copy and paste in this instance. So that's the same thing for purchase info. And then you've got supplier name, code and note, which are exactly the same as all these. So let's just copy this. So we've got supplier name, supplier code, and then note. And that's it. So when we open a part, we should now read in everything except manufacturing info and mass. So everything else and these checkboxes, they should all get filled in by the custom properties. Let's quickly add mass because that's just as easy. So all this, you'll see the indentation level. We're inside this custom properties call. So you'll see it goes all the way down to where we close here. So outside of it, so once we've done the custom properties here, and you come outside, we'll then read the mass. So this dot, I don't think we've named the mass. Oh, sheet metal mass text we've called it. I don't know why I've called it sheet metal. It's just rename it to mass text. So this dot mass text dot text. And again, with SolidDNA, it's really easy. All you have to do is type in model.massProperties, and that will get you all the mass properties. The center of gravity, the center of inertia, or the moment of inertia. It'll get you all those things. And again, question mark in case there isn't any. There shouldn't ever be a case, but we'll do that. And then you got the mass directly, which it says here is in kilograms. And then we've got this helper function mass in metric, which basically does a string and shows you in a nice visual way. It says, you know, X grams or X kilograms, so we'll just use that function. and that gets the mass and then shows it in metric. So now the mass should be filled out as well. So we'll have everything now except material and manufacturing information here. Let's add the material, because that really is quite simple. Again, this is something that would be a lot of work in SolidWorks. If any of you have used it before, you know how really bad the material API is. There's basically nothing to it. You really struggle to read and write materials or find anything about them. That's the point of SolidDNA, to make it easy. So as you'll see now, it really is easy. So what we want to do is get all the materials and set them to this list first. So it's going to populate the raw material list. So get all materials, this dot material, raw material dot item source, because it's going to be a collection of all the properties. It's going to equal DNA.application.get materials, and you can specify a specific database. If you leave it, you get everything, and that's as simple as that. That is now going to fill the raw material list with all possible materials inside SolidWorks. Now we want to select existing material. So if the part's already got a material, we want it to automatically select from this list. And just before we do that, let's also set the what's it called, the display member path. So the thing we want to display in the dropdown, and that's going to be called display name, and that's because if you look at get materials, you press F12, you'll see you return this material. Press F12 again, and here's the class for the material. You can see we've got this property called display name, and that's going to return the name of the material as well as the classification. So that's a nice thing to show. That's what we're going to choose to show. So that's why we're going to say display name. That's why we've typed that here. So it's looking for a property in the material. Select existing material. So that'll show all the materials. Now we want to get the material. So that's again just as easy. Existing material equals model dot get material, and that's going to get the material. So if we don't have a material, then we want to clear selection. So we have existing material as null. Then in fact, let's not even bother checking that way. Let's just clear the selection first. So this dot raw material list dot selected index as -1. Select the existing material, and then if we have one, if we have a material, so if it isn't equal to null, then we want to try and find it in this list and select it. So to do that, we can do a one-liner again. We want to set the selected item, and it's going to be we should have kept a reference to this material list here. So raw materials equals get materials, set the item source to materials, and now we can query these materials instead of querying this item source. So now we want the selected item to be the materials, and again we'll question mark it to make sure we have some, so it won't run if we haven't. We want the first or default, so the first item we find, and if we don't, it'll return null. Where the database matches, because that's the file, the solid material file. Want to make sure the database is the exact same as the existing materials database, and we also want to make sure the name of the material is the same name. So if the part's got a material that has the same SolidWorks database file and the same name as the one we've loaded, we know that's the same material, because that's how SolidWorks selects them. So we set the selected item to either nothing if it doesn't find one, or if it does, the first item that matches the database and the name. So that will then pre-select the material from the list. So with that code, we'll now have all these. We'll have this, 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 all that material. The refresh works. We haven't done these two buttons, and then we haven't done this. But let's go ahead and run this now and just have a glance at what we've done, because we've got a really small file, to be honest, for how much we've already done. We've got 200 lines of code, and we've got, I'd say, over 60% of the way done now. So let's just press F5 to spin up SolidWorks, and let's go ahead and add some of these properties and check that they get read into the file. So it's saying open a part, so let's go ahead and open a part. And you can see here's where I was playing a bit earlier. We've got a description. There's nothing in here, but I think that's because we don't have the properties. It's found that we've got this custom plastic too. Again, I was messing around with some properties. And you'll also see this drop down now. It's got every possible material in SolidWorks. And you can see it's got the name after it, such as where it's from, the steels, the plastics, the alloys. And if you click on them, we'll do that after, because we want it to set. But there's your materials. It's correctly identified the material we've got. It's read the length, which is a unresolved value, is D1 at sketch 1, which I've added a single dimension here, and then it's resolved it to the correct value as well, so we can see what the length is and we can change it if we like. It's read the mass, 21.41 grams, which if we compare that with SolidWorks, the mass is in pounds. Let's just change that. Let's try again. So easy, 21.41 grams. So we've got the same mass as SolidWorks. The finish hasn't selected anything, and the purchase information hasn't, so that means it hasn't found any. So let's just go ahead and add some more properties. So let's just go to the custom properties. This should be status, so let's add one called status, and we'll just keep it really obvious. My status. That's okay. That. Let's click refresh, and it should load in. And you can see that's worked. It's loaded my status. So let's do that again for all the others, so we can check everything's working. So we should have a reversion. My reversion. We should have a part number, which was part NO. And do 1, 2, 3, 4. Materials, material. Manufacturing info was called manufacturing information, and it's going to be, say, plasma. It's going to be all uppercase. It's going to be separated by commas. Plasma laser roll. Let's say, let's just do some random ones so that we can try and read it back in afterwards. The length we've got there, we know that's fine. The finish, we want to be one of those properties, which I think was painted, was one of them. Let's call it painted. Purchase information. The only one I can remember was rubber, so let's just put rubber in. Supplier name was just supplier, I believe. My supplier. The supplier code was supplier number / code, I believe. Supplier 1, 2, 3, 4. And then note, I think, was just note. There's a load of properties. Let's OK. Let's refresh. You can see everything's loaded in here. My status, revision, part number, grams, painted's worked. This hasn't. We'll check that in a moment. Supplier has. So everything here has worked as we expected, apart from this. So we've got rubber, nylon belt. So let's check what's wrong there. We've got purchase information. Let's go back to the value. And we've got purchase information. Purchase information, so that's correct. So it must be in the code where we read. And because we copy and pasted, we might have missed something here, and in fact, let's just put a breakpoint there. Let's there you go. Just noticed that. So we've checked the name of finish, not of purchase info. So let's just stop that. And I'm going to have lost all those properties because I didn't save. I should have pressed save before I did that. Let's run that again, and let's try and do that really quickly. I'll just fast forward the video so you don't have to watch that again. Okay, I'll save that this time before we do anything else. Let's refresh. And there we go, you can see everything's loaded in again. These two have loaded. We can now change them. Won't do anything yet because we haven't done any code. But you can, select what you want, type what you want. You can also type and then click reload and refresh, and it should reset these. So let's try that. And there you go, you can see everything's changed back to what the part is. So that looks like all the reading's working fine. If we close, that's still working. Let's make a new part with no properties in. It should all be blank. And we've got one issue here. So we have, this is actually in SolidDNA, where it's effectively saying there's no mass, which really I was throwing here because it's saying there's no mass. I'm going to fix this now. We don't really care if there's no body, which I'm guessing is what 2 is, yeah. Because we just want to return an empty mass properties if that's the case. So I only want to know if it's an unknown error. Then we'll throw that. Otherwise, it's going to be the mass properties. We also want to check status equals mass properties no body. Then we want to return a new mass properties with nothing in. Return empty. Okay, so that'll fix that. So let's just do that once more. Let's open the original part first. There's all the properties. Let's close out. Let's make a brand new part. And you can see it's all blank because there's no information, and the grams is now 0 because it's not found anything. Let's open part 1 again. And it all fills in. So that all looks like it's working great. Close that one, that empties. So that's all the reading done already except this. So let's just go ahead and do these checkboxes. So back to here we go, the reading. So manufacturing info. So first thing we want to do is clear off all the checkboxes, which is going to be fun. So we've got to go through weld. Again, I'll fast forward this. I'm just going to do the checked equals, and then we're going to go through every one. So assembly, plasma, laser. And then I've done it again. Just need to change this to is checked. I always think it's called checked. So this is just every single checkbox. We're setting to false, so there's no check by default. So clear previous checks. I'm gonna read in value, so that's gonna be the manufacturing info. We don't want the result, we just want the value. So we get the value, and now we want to split this in by commas. So that's going to be either nothing, or say plasma, or it's going to be plasma, comma, fold, something like that. We'll also do a little bit of cleanup in case there's spaces in between, that we just remove spaces, and we want to uppercase as well. So let's start by checking if it's not null or empty, so we've actually got some string. Or in fact, we'll check if it's null or white space, in case it's just white characters. So if it's not, so that means we've got something. We first want to split and then iterate through each part. So we can do for each var part in manufacturing info dot split and split it by a comma. Just before we do that, so manufacturing info will do dot replace white spaces with nothing. So this will just remove any white space in between anything first. Then we'll split it by the comma. We'll also uppercase it, so you can do that anywhere really, so that everything's capitalized. So remove white spaces, capitalize, and split by commas. So now in here for each part, we can do a switch now, and we can switch based on the part. So now we can switch by part, and then this is the properties here. So we can actually get, in case we change these, we could base this text, this name, off the value you want to set, which I think is what we'll do. So we'll use the word weld, and then we'll uppercase the word weld as well. So we'll do case this dot weld dot content whoop, where's it gone? This dot weld dot content to upper. So this will get the content. What's wrong with that? A constant as expected. Oh, we can't do that then. Okay, so for here, instead of just typing weld in here, we'll go ahead and make another set of constant values up here. So I'll just put manufacturing weld. That's going to be weld. And then we're going to do this for everyone. So actually, let's just get rid of that and that. I want assembly, plasma, laser. So there's the values we want. Scroll down. We check if it's a weld. So if part of that string has a weld, then we want to check the weld box. And then we just repeat that for everyone. So this big long list now will split all the manufacturing info by commas, find out if each part matches any of these names, and then it will check the checkboxes if it does. So let's just press F5 and check if that part works, and if so, that's the whole reading working. And there you go, you can see we've got plasma, laser, and roll checked, and that's because before I closed it, we added this manufacturing information, plasma, laser, roll. So let's put some spaces in, as we mentioned. You can put them anywhere, even in between words. And let's just put something random in at the end. And that should still work, that should still find plasma, laser, roll. It'll ignore random, and we could do purchase. So we click OK to that and refresh. Purchase should get checked as well. And you can see that works nicely. So now that's all done, let's just do this reset button, because that's really easy, and then all that's left is the apply button. So the reset button just wants to clear all this information. And we've got another little issue here on closing down. So because we've shut down, I want to null check that. Right, so that's all the reading. Reset button, that was it. Go to this panel, click the reset, add a click event, rename it to reset button, go to the code behind, rename that to reset button. And this one's really simple. Just go this.description text.text equals string.empty. Same for status, revision, part number. Material wants to be -1. All these want to be unchecked, which was copy and paste because that was quite a big line of code. Length wants to be emptied. Now length is an interesting one because if you reset, the evaluated's nothing, but I guess that's what they want for this reset button anyway, so let's just do that. Mass, that's really a read-only again. I don't think we want to clear mass. The mass is what it is, so clicking reset's a bit silly to clear that. We'll leave that as it is. These want to be -1, finish and purchase. And then these three want to be nothing, supplier name. Supplier code and note. Press F5 and we'll test that little function. Which should just wipe out all information apart from the mass. And I guess that's if you want to wipe details, which is another interesting thing because we haven't mentioned what happens if we, well I guess we do, if we reset, all this wipes. And then I guess if you click apply now, it would still work. It'd write nothing. It'd write a blank string to description and length and all these. So I guess that's the point of that button. I guess really those read-onlys we should just leave as well because you can't change them. But yeah, it doesn't matter either way. If they want them in, they can just uncomment that line of code that clears them out. We've missed one here. Got laser checked. So we'll also have to add that to the other one. So that's now all done. We want to set the material and the properties. We'll leave that open. Right, so that's all the reading done. That's the reset button done. So the last thing now is to apply changes when the users type stuff. So let's go to the apply button, add an event again. Same as all the others. So in the apply button, first we want to get the active model. We want to check we have a part. So if the model is nothing, or it isn't a part, then we just return, we just don't do anything. Now we want to set custom properties. So to do that, we just do model.setCustomProperty. Interestingly, this is because this is quicker to set a specific name, but what you might not know is where we did the read, and we do this model.customProperties to get existing ones. Inside here, you can actually set custom properties by just saying, say you've checked properties like here, first or default, and you've got a certain property. So let's say we've got var description is the first or default where it says description, and then you could say if description isn't equal to null, you could set the property as simple as doing description, getting the custom property, and you can delete it here like this, or to set it, just simply do value equals new value, and that's it. That will actually save and set the custom property value. You don't need to, as well as reading here, you can set. So that's just an interesting thing for you there. If you wanted to set custom properties or even delete them inside this same function, you can do it just as easy as that. But in our case, we don't want to read the custom properties because we don't care whether they exist or not. We just want to set them either way. So we just call this set custom property. The name will be the description. The value will be the description text. Then we'll go through there, read only, read only, read only. Material, well, let's actually call that description. To set the materials, it's still really easy, it's just slightly different. We want to, we need to set the, and get the active model, which is there, and you want to call set material, and then you need to cast to material, and you want to get the currently selected item from the list. Now we haven't thought of something here, is you might not have something selected. We'll come to that one last. Well, actually no, let's just do if this dot raw material list dot selected index is less than 0, so if it's not got anything selected, we'll set the material to null. We'll clear the material. Oh. If user doesn't have a material selected, clear it. That also brings me to another point just before we finish this, where we load the material list in here. What if the user wants to delete a material? We need to add another material to this list. So materials.insert at the start, a new material. And by default, when you set a material, if the material has got this database file not found as false, it means it doesn't know where the material is. It's going to just delete the material from the part. So we could just create a new material with the database file not found as false, which is by default anyway, and give it a name, remove material, and because of the display name using classification, let's also set that so it looks nice, and just put not specified. So we'll insert this extra material at the start of that list. So at the start of this drop down that says remove material. So if they select that and click apply, then it'll find it in this list here and set the material, and then in SolidDNA it basically checks if the material is null or the material database file not found as false, sorry, file found false. Then it'll basically set the material to nothing, it'll remove the material. So back to here, if they don't have anything selected, so if they've clicked the reset button and then nothing's selected, and then they click save or apply, then this will kick in, it'll apply nothing. Otherwise, we want to set the material to whatever the user has selected. And because this list is bound, this raw materials list is bound here, item source, to materials, which is a list of material, then we know we can cast the selected item back to a material to set. So that's all there is to setting the material. So that's the description. We've set the material. Those are read only. These will come to, again, manufacturing info. We'll just jump back to this in a second. Length we want to set, so that's just the same as this. not set, not set, finished and purchase. Slightly different, but still just as easy. Get the finish, and this is going to be the finish list dot selected item. We could possibly do selected value. I'm just not sure about that. Let's do selected value and just see what happens. If not, then we'll do selected item, cast it to a combo box item, and then get the content of a string. But I'm guessing this might work by default. I think it will. So that's the finish. That's the purchase info. Name, code, and note. And there we go, that's all the custom properties. So there's just this manufacturing info left. So for that we need to read all these checkboxes and create a string from it. So we'll start off with a manufacturing info is an empty string, and then we'll just do one at a time. If this dot weld dot is checked, manufacturing info plus equals, and then we're going to add, in fact, let's do a list. New list of strings. We'll just do add, and we'll add the manufacturing info weld to the list. What's wrong with that? There we go. So we check. So that's all the lists. So now we'll have a list of strings based on which item was checked. And we just need to convert that to a string separated by commas and set the value. So that's again really easy. Just do set manufacturing info, and the value is string.join by commas the manufacturing info, and that's it. So I think that's the entire program in 370 lines of code, which would be thousands and thousands if you're using SolidWorks API. So let's just run this and do a final check. Press F5. In fact, yeah, that's fine. One other thing that was mentioned by the person that wanted this was a specific order of these properties when you set them. So if they select plasma and laser and lathe, that they want, say, plasma first and lathe last and what have you, well, that order is defined here. So in the set, so in the apply button, when you're creating this list, the order at which you add them to this list, so the order at which you check the weld and then the assembly and then the plasma, that defines the order of the string. So if you want, say, this roll to come before purchase, you'd move this if check here above this purchase check here. So the order that if you want to change it is in this part here. So let's open up a, oops, wrong one. Open up a part. You can see it's already loaded everything in that we checked. So let's go and change everything. Let's do my description 2. You can't change them. Let's change the material to ductile iron. Let's uncheck those. Let's check weld, drill, laser. Length will leave us what it is. Or in fact, let's just change it to test. We'll change this to zinc, this to bearing, this to my supplier 2, this to supplier 999, and my note 2. So basically we've added all the different things to it. So let's click apply. We've got one issue here, so let's have a look what that is. Unable to cast of type, so it is a combo box item then selected value. So this is the one thing we want to fix. That's the part that I said might work, that I thought it would. So it's actually a combo box item, which we then want to cast the contents to a string. So let's fix that a little bit. Run again. Open the file. Change that to 2. Plastic, we'll change to ductile iron. Uncheck those, check a few others. We'll go weld, drill and saw this time. My supplier 2, 9992. Painted to galv, rubber to motor. And we'll click apply. There you go, instantly you've seen the materials changed, so ductile iron's been set. Let's go take a look at all the custom properties. So you can see length's gone to test. Evaluated hasn't been re-evaluated, so we'll fix that in a moment. Status don't change because it's read-only. The manufacturing info has changed correctly, weld, drill, saw, which is what we selected. Galv has changed, motors changed, suppliers, so that's all working great. Let's just clear manufacturing info and refresh. And now you see these haven't unchecked. So that's actually interesting. Oh, SolidWorks didn't save it, that's why. Click OK, refresh. There we go, so that's working fine. Assembly lathe, let's apply that. Properties, assembly lathe, that all looks good. So everything looks like it's working. The only issue was this evaluated. The only issue there was when we've applied, we've set values. Once we've set everything, what we want to do at the end of that is just reload, effectively click refresh to pull everything back in from the part to be sure it's all updated. So at the end of the apply, just simply stick the read details at the end, and that'll just refetch all the details. And it also works as like a clarification that what you then see in that form is what's actually set in the part. You don't have to go manually open it to double check. And that's everything we need there. I believe there was one other thing which I've forgotten about, which I didn't put in this little screenshot, and that was certain rules that if certain things were checked, so say if assembly was checked then plasma couldn't be, and if plasma was checked drill couldn't be, or rules like that. Basically some logic that if you go ahead and select, like I'm saying, let's use plasma and assembly as the example because I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it was. But let's say we click assembly, then we click plasma, and only one of those is allowed. So when you click plasma, you'd want assembly to uncheck. When you click assembly, you'd want plasma to uncheck. So to do that, we just want to add, go to the form, click say assembly, and then add is checked. And oh no, not checked. I keep getting these two mixed up. Just checked on its own. Add a new event handler. Let's go down to it, and then uncheck plasma, and this will just make sure plasma's unchecked. And let's do the same for plasma. Let's do the opposite. So click plasma, type checked, add a new event handler, and let's uncheck assembly. Press F5 and let's give that a quick check. And what this won't do as well, you have to bear in mind, this should work. So you can see plasma and assembly work. You now can't select both of them at the same time. But where it won't work, and again that might be by, I'd personally leave it that way, if we actually type in assembly plasma, and then refresh. Oh, I don't think the SolidWorks are saving the properties. Oh yeah, assembly plasma. Oh, I stand corrected. Oh, it will work in this case because when we're in code, we're reading assembly. So if we go to the read details, you'll see why it works now. We first clear everything, and then we do this little check here as we go through. And in the order which they've been assigned in the custom properties, because we split it based on that, we're then going to check, say, assembly here. Well, when this isChecked gets called, it's going to fire the event that we made down here. Keep going. It's going to fire this. So the rule's still going to work, but what it's going to do is it's based on whichever appears last is going to be the one that wins. So if we went to property and we have assembly plasma, and then we refresh, you see plasma's 1. If we change that to plasma assembly and then reload, if it's actually saved, let's just double check that's saved. Plasma assembly, yep. If we refresh now, assembly should be checked, which it is. So that's how you do some basic rules. Again, that can be customized to exactly how you want it to be, just by going into the UI, selecting the checkbox that you want, and then it'll highlight here, and then just at the end add a checked event, and then do the logic of whatever you want to do. So hopefully that'll cover everything. So that's it for this video. We've covered quite a lot in this video. We've done mass, we've done materials, we've done dropdowns, combos, some logic, we've done setting and getting custom properties. But you can see already how easy it now is to work with the SolidWorks code. Everything's just you know, active model is what it is. You get an event when the active model changes. You just do custom properties to get them. You do set custom properties to set. You do set material to set material. Everything's just really straightforward. You know, it's nice and easy with no issues. And if you go into the code, the actual SolidDNA code, you'll see how complicated it gets just to do all that. That it'll actually get, you know, wrap the errors for you. It'll check if it's a part. It'll clean up all the COM references. It just handles all of the hard work for you. You know, get materials as, you know, this nasty bit of code here to get the material. So the point of SolidDNA, which hopefully you're starting to realize as these videos go on, is to just keep things really easy for the developer, the person making this code here. When you just want to do certain things like set properties, it's really obvious. You've got a model, you've set the active model, then you do a dot and you've got, you know, as assembly, as drawing, as part, custom properties, extension, file path, materials, if it's been saved, mass properties, and then mass properties has got all the values. It's just really clean and modern, and you know, it takes all that hard work away from you so you can just focus on doing what you want to do. So I think in the next video I'll just go back on the forum, we'll take a look at what some of the early requests were, and now we've done a lot of the work in this SolidDNA. I've added a lot since you last saw it behind the scenes to do all of the stuff that's now being done. I can really focus on the main code, so I'll go back to the forum and we'll choose something that's needs doing, and we'll do the next video on whatever's on the forum. If you have any suggestions, comments, queries, please do post in the video. That's where they'll get read. Also, like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and then that's what keeps the videos coming. So I hope you enjoyed this.